Hi, this is podcast number 10. We're going to continue talking about Congress. So here's a recap. In 1787 is when this new Constitution was ratified by the people. It called for elections, a new kind of government, a new one-of-a-kind Congress made up of the people to serve in councils of 2 years as House of Representatives and 4 years as senators. These new groups of men knew the heavy responsibility they carried on their shoulders, but they were enthusiastic. And I know something about enthusiasm. Never ask your children to mop the kitchen floor when they just watched Mary Poppins. The first time I saw that movie, I was so inspired. I was 11 years old, and I was determined that life should go down with a spoonful of sugar. It must have been a Friday because the next day was floor mopping day, which was always on Saturday. Dad and Mother went grocery shopping and left me to mop the kitchen floor. And with a Mary Poppins and a little Tom Sawyer flair, I convinced my younger sister it would be fun to help me mop the floor. We removed everything off the floor, all tables, all chairs. And this job was going to be take us a while and be quite an undertaking. It was a big kitchen. We changed into our swimsuits for this event. Next, I wet the floor with a bucket of water that squished all over, and then I squirted out dish soap generously all over the floor. Then we were ready to start mimicking our form of ice skating. We were in the middle of our joyous activity when our parents came home. To envision the scene, you must realize that suds were 6 inches deep. We had been ice skating for a while, and they were drifting off into the doorways of the adjoining rooms, and they were about 6 inches up onto the cupboard fronts. There were tiny bubbles in the air. We smiled ear to ear at our parents, who looked at us so stunned they didn't have words, which was probably a good thing. We were calmly told to now, as of immediately, start mopping up the bubbles. Where to start was the question. Mother suggested we started in the doorway of the living room, probably to save her carpet. We took large mixing bowls of suds outside and flew them into the neighbors through the wind and over the fence. It took us most of the day to wipe everything all down, and when we had finished, Mother even had to admit it was sparkling clean in every corner. It was the only mopping day I ever really enjoyed. It may have been extreme, but it was a job well done, full of suds and enthusiasm. The job had been the same, but my attitude had been different. Enthusiastic people can accomplish a lot. They may need to be reined in sometimes, but these people in the government, they were enthusiastic about getting the job done. We are still in Article 1 and talking about Congress. The Constitution says the states had to give up rights to Congress for the good of the united country. The wording was, the people of the states hereby delegate to the federal Congress the power to. It goes on with a list of powers that they gave to Congress away from the states. So these enthusiastic representatives and senators headed off to Washington to do what the Constitution, the rights that the Constitution gave them to do. One of them was collect taxes, duties, imports, and excise. These were all indirect taxes, meaning they are not coming directly from individuals. Duty taxes from other countries, things that are sold here, such as Kinder eggs from Germany, that good chocolate. Import tax is paid on ships in harbors and cargo, and like, oh, the nestling dolls that we buy from Russia. Um, Excise tax is manufactured products being sold, like your computer, and direct tax is levied on persons and income and property, and we pay direct taxes as well. And there's indirect taxes, direct taxes, and then there's state taxes, and every state has to pay them. It is determined by the population of their state, and this pays for our military, interstate roads, and federal buildings, courts, and safety. The states gave power to the federal government to be over money. So the first Congress had to decide if we would use the metric system or not. And then they decided what size coins we were going to use and what metals and what they were going to print on them. They had to decide on paper money and what to print on it. They needed a safe place to keep the gold and silver and in the treasury, and a place to mold metals and print money. They were also supposed to punish counterfeiters. They are still over all of this today, and Congress spends money, and they're good at it. So am I. And they borrow money and set up budgets for all agencies of the federal government. The founders wanted to keep all this in control of the people. Mistakes have been made, and if we ever want to balance the budget again, hard changes have to be made in the future. The states gave power to Congress to be over the postal service. In colonial America, an appointed individual was called postmaster, and he used his home as the post office. And then England hired Alexander Hamilton to be the royal postmaster when they were here in charge of things. And then after the Revolutionary War, Ben Franklin was the postmaster. There were 75 post offices in the 13 colonies. Mail was delivered bi-weekly, and Benjamin Franklin organized the routes and organized the postal workers. Post offices, and I'm going to show you a picture here of, if all goes well. There we go. Post offices are federal buildings on federal lands, and they still are. But in 1982, the postal system became a separate organization that operates as an independent company known as USPS, the United States Postal Service. I am so grateful for the post office, and I'm grateful how it is run today. Remember how Marco Polo went to China and learned about their postal system and came back to Europe, and it was installed in Europe as well. And then in America, it came here, and then eventually we ended up even with the Pony Express to get mail clear out west. I am so grateful. In my life, I've received many special letters from my sons when they were in foreign countries serving missions, and special cards from people who mean a lot to me. When my parents were in England for a couple of years, they were able to correspond with me with mail. My mother was born in 1906, and she had an uncle that lived in California. And one Christmas, when she was a very little girl, like 3 years old, she received a gift from him. All the children did in her family, all her siblings. And they were Christmas tree ornaments. And this ornament was like a really heavy cardstock. It was yellow gold colored, and it was in the shape of a moon with a nose on it. And my mother hung it on the Christmas tree that Christmas. And every year of her life, she hung that that Christmas tree ornament. I remember it very well. It meant a lot to her, and it came to her through the Postal Service. And it came by horseback to her. She lived in a remote little town called Bennington in Idaho, and it was delivered by a postman on a horse. Um, I I back then and early in my life, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have Zoom on computers. And so our only means of communication with other people who we loved, who were far away from us, was with the Postal Service. So I'm grateful for it. And I think the United States has done well with their Postal Service. Um, I wanted to share with you a story about a man who you all have heard of. An early representative from New Hampshire was a name that you all are familiar with. It's Daniel Webster. His father's name was Ebenezer, and he fought with George Washington. I like that name, Ebenezer. I name all of the outbuildings on our acreage, and I have Ichabod and Bertha, but I think the next outbuilding is going to be Ebenezer. I like that name. In Daniel Webster's home, growing up, Daniel heard all the stories and learned great respect for Washington from the stories that his dad would tell him about when he served in the Revolutionary War with him. His father had been against the Constitution, but when he heard that Washington had signed it, he said, "Washington will never miss or lead us astray. I will sign its ratification." Daniel was the 9th of 10 children. He was small and frail, and his mother worried about him. As a toddler, he couldn't walk very well on his feeble legs. And so his mother took him in her arms and rode on a horse some distance several times a week to the shore of the Atlantic Ocean, and got in the salty, cold water with him and worked with his legs and massaged them and had him exercise them to strengthen the muscles. Daniel, at age 5, made friends with an old sailor man named Robert Wise. Mr. Wise would carry him on his shoulders and tell him stories about the Revolutionary War that he fought in. Then Daniel would sit and read to the old man the newspaper. Daniel said his mother would talk to him about words and their meanings on their trips to the ocean. He said his mother taught him to read. He couldn't remember a time when he didn't know how to read. He became a great senator and Secretary of State, too. And he was the Secretary of State under Thomas Jefferson. He spoke often and inspired many to cultivate reverence for liberty and Christianity. He wrote the first dictionary in America, and he got one of the first copyrights in America. All of you have seen a Webster dictionary, I'm sure. The state gave power to Congress to control copyrights and patents, and these copyrights are what Daniel Webster got for his dictionary. These laws are important to encourage people to be creative and inventive for the good of all of our country. I'd like to tell you about somebody else in history who was an example of appreciating liberty and arts in our lives. First of all, I need to go back and show you that. We'll get rid of that. This is a picture of Daniel Webster. I know he looks kind of stern, but that's how they made men look back then. But that's a picture of Daniel Webster. It's a painting of him, not a picture. Okay, and then I need to move this again. And this is a picture of the man we're going to talk about right now. His name was Frederick the Great from Prussia, which is Germany area. He was born into nobility in 1712 and died in 1786. He wrote um, that the ruler was in reality a servant of his state. A concept of royalty serving the people was unknown to the people of that age in Europe. His goal was to make every one of his subjects feel secure and happy. Frederick's father was always annoyed with him. He was disappointed he was of small frame, and he hated it that Frederick could read better than him and that he played the flute. The king was a very militant man and felt Frederick did not measure up. He would yell at the boy and throw things at him. Frederick loved to play the flute, and he had the opportunity to play with Johann Sebastian Bach on the harpsichord. When Frederick was 18, he was determined to go live with his relatives in England. He had had it with his dad. His loyal friend, Lieutenant Lotte, helped him escape. His father sent guards to bring him back. They stopped him on the border of France and brought them back to the king. The king locked Frederick in his room and made him sit by the window as he had his friend executed in front of him. The plan was to kill Frederick, too. Through the pleadings of the kings of Sweden, Austria, England, and other crowns, the prince was saved. Frederick was taken to a small remote town, ordered not to be saluted or shown any favoritism. He learned firsthand how his people lived and loved and worshipped. It changed him into a great man he became. He started the first college in Europe. The arts flourished in Prussia, and operas were open to all to enjoy them. He would have easily fit in America. He believed in fighting for liberty. He led many battles in the 7-Year War in Europe. The other countries in Europe thought he probably would be a weak king and they could take over some of the land that belonged to Prussia. But he led his people who loved him, and he battled right with them, and he was able to hold his own. He also believed in the rights of authors and musicians and artists and scientists. Here in America, authors, musicians, artists, and scientists flourished as well, and because of the copyrights and the patent laws that we had here. The states gave power to Congress to ensure no titles of nobility were given. Only elected officials and military officers had titles. European countries had families who are known as nobility, and they have great privileges over other citizens. No family from the USA can be distinguished from the rest of the nation. The states gave power to the Congress to regulate interstate commerce. The founders wanted freedom to move about in the nation, not only to be so they weren't stopped at every state border and have to pay duties and before they could pass on roads into the state. They wanted to be able to trade and sell freely between the states for commerce to grow. Our government helps keep an open market where others can compete and keep prices down with no monopolies. Today, Congress has fixed prices on electricity and some other services. They regulate radios, internet, airplanes, and a lot more. They set standards and safety measures. They have increased their control over the American businessman. That has led to small businesses struggling sometimes. And so there's always room for some reformation to be made in Congress. There's always something there for them to debate and to vote on. The Constitution was the best ideas to ensure freedom and liberty. We have only talked about half of the powers that the people gave Congress. I picked a few that are usually not mentioned so that you would be mindful of there's a lot that the founding fathers thought through well, and they put in the Constitution. It took a lot of faith in the minds and hearts of the people who were just coming out of war against a powerful king to sign their names in agreement to letting Congress have so much power and the states giving them up. The only way this happened was they read everything about the Continental Congress. They talked and debated the issues among themselves, and they educated themselves to remain free. Oh, how grateful I am for our freedoms. May God be with you till we meet again.